On a semi-related issue, I wanted to ask you, Victoria, about the piece you wrote in The Nation, Why is Marissa Alexander Still Being Punished for Fighting Back? The famous case of the woman who fired a warning shot at her abusive husband. She was sentenced, what was it, to 20 years in prison. This is right around the time of Trayvon Martin. Now the prosecutor, state attorney in Florida's 4th Judicial Circuit Court, Angela Corey, was just defeated in yesterday's primary.
Yes. We can see that oftentimes, as we see as hopefully we do not see in Brisha's case in the end, but as we see with many domestic violence survivors, that when they take actions to protect themselves, and almost always it's self-defense, even if it's not happening in the heat of the confrontation, but they see something in their abuser's eyes and they say, this is it. You know, if I don't do something, I'm going to end up dead. He is going to kill me. And we see that prosecutors tend to go after them. Domestic violence is often dismissed as, quote unquote, the abuse excuse. It's disregarded. There's still not widespread recognition of the insidious ways in which domestic violence works. So they might say, well, why were you afraid of him if you weren't being hit all the time? And after a while, it's not just the physical violence, it's the threat of physical violence. It's being conditioned to fear your loved one and to do what you need to do in order to avoid violence. But we see with Angela Corey charging Marissa Alexander, prosecuting her, and adding at her discretion the mandatory sentencing that allowed her to be sentenced to 20 years in prison. And then when Marissa Alexander won her appeal, going after her again and threatening her with a 60-year sentence for firing a warning shot in which no one was hurt and no one was killed. And we see this again and again. What's unusual for Marissa Alexander is the outpouring of support she got.
And again, Angela Corey defeated, and this is the same prosecutor who was in charge of the prosecution of George Zimmerman, who got off. I want to thank you all for being with us. We'll continue to follow Brisha's case. Victoria Law, we're linked to your pieces. Martina Latessa, thanks so much for being with us. Cleveland police detective in the domestic violence unit, who is the aunt of Brisha, and Ian Friedman, her criminal defense attorney.